Today we are speaking with the San Diego County District Attorney Summer Stephan. Ms. Stephan has devoted her life to protecting children in families and providing justice to the voiceless and the most vulnerable. She is a national leader in the fight against sexual exploitation and human trafficking. We would like to start by clearing up some misconceptions of what our audience may think human trafficking really is. Would you please help us get a better understanding?
Yes, good. Nice to be with you on this very important topic. Human trafficking is really the most misunderstood human rights and criminal violation. It is, people picture that someone has been kidnapped, they're put in the trunk of a car, there are chains, there are visible bruises and injuries, but in fact, human trafficking hides in plain view. It is based in deception. Mostly it's about deception, about coercion. It's the exploitation of a human being for sex or for labor by use of force or fraud or coercion. But the reality is that less than 20% of the cases involve physical force. What it involves is manipulation, deception, mental coercion, threats, that sort of thing. And that's how the traffickers get away with it, is because it is much more difficult to detect if you don't know what it is and know what you're looking for.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wow. So where do we even begin to look at something? Do we feel as the public we're looking at any red flags? What could we be seeing? Or not a misconception, we don't want to report on something incorrectly. How do we help our children?
So knowledge, yeah, you're so right on that. People are worried to report because they're worried that maybe what they're seeing isn't human trafficking or isn't a crime, but it is better to report. So long as people report what it is they're seeing honestly, they don't get in trouble for reporting, and it can be life-saving. And if they don't feel that it's a 911 situation, they still need to report to the National Human Trafficking Hotline, which is 24/7 in multiple languages. And the hotline then can communicate with the local human trafficking task forces and can assess what level of urgency does this report have. And sometimes it is multiple reports that come together that paint a picture. We know, for example, that this is a much bigger problem than people think it is. That it's the second largest criminal industry in the world, in our country, in the United States, and in most urban areas like San Diego County. We know that about 5,000 victims of sex trafficking alone happen every year, and that the average age of a sex trafficking victim is a young 16-year-old. So we know that this is something very compelling that all people out there with a heart and a mind have to engage in. We also know that labor trafficking is very prevalent, especially with the immigrant communities that are sometimes sold on a job that is misrepresented, and it turns out to be a 24/7 almost domestic servant with very little pay. Some of the misconceptions, Trish, that really promulgate this crime are that if you get paid anything, that means it's not human trafficking, or if you consent to the abuse, that's not human trafficking. The truth is that you can still get paid something, and it still can be slavery-like conditions amounting to labor trafficking. And you can consent per se to prostitution, but in fact, you're a victim of sex trafficking because that consent is not real. It is based on threats, on deception, and on fear.
Mm-hmm. Okay, now what you shared with us is just quite daunting. How, for those parents that are listening out there and are thinking, I need to have this conversation with my child, but this is going to be difficult, how do you suggest they begin that?
Starting with a conversation is the way to begin. I would say to all parents out there, don't assume that you are immune from this type of modern day slavery, that your children are immune from it. Don't make those assumptions because of social media and how easy it is for a trafficker to communicate with your child in the privacy of your home. It makes every family vulnerable and not immune to this threat. I have seen as district attorney this affect families from every socioeconomic sector of our community, every race and ethnicity. No one intact families, families where there's been a divorce with loving parents, some with abusive parents, but it crosses across all sectors because these traffickers are almost like mastermind manipulators, and they are able to pose as a friend and get into the circle of trust of our children through the social media. We know even as adults that if we're talking to someone over social media, even if we've never met that person, over time they become familiar as if they are part of our friend circle. Imagine our kids and how easily they, in seeking acceptance and love and belonging, which every child wants, how easy it is for someone to come in. And let me get to the heart of it. Every human has a vulnerability, and this is what the traffickers get at. It's that vulnerability. Now, that vulnerability may be poverty, but it may be that the child is experiencing bullying in school or doesn't feel they fit in. They don't feel pretty enough or smart enough. They have a learning disability. It can be a multitude of factors, so that vulnerability is what drives the ability of the traffickers to manipulate a child into thinking that this person is really someone who loves them, cares about them, and is offering them a better life, a life of a grown-up where you're on your own. And they can, over time, seduce these children into running away with them, into leaving their families. And once these children are away from their families, they become isolated, and the trafficker then takes complete control.
Okay, thank you, Summer, for this. Thank you for spending the time with us. It's been so educational, and I've taken some notes and can see where further conversation can touch on many other areas. Please come back with us, and let's talk about the children with those vulnerabilities. What came to mind was foster care, our homeless, or throwaway teens.
Definitely, those are the top categories. You know, kids in foster care or have experienced that system, homeless kids, and throwaway teens who, you know, are being thrown out because they may be LGBT or other factors within the home where the new boyfriend doesn't want children around or whatever it may be. Those are the top most vulnerable category of children. But again, that vulnerability can cross to areas that people may not think of, like simply a child who is not feeling like they're keeping up with school, they're not smart enough, they're experiencing some learning disabilities, language barriers, or other things.
Amazing. Yes, very important conversations, and I look forward to that conversation in the future. Again, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day.
Always great to talk to you about these very important topics and to bring awareness and potentially save a family out there.
Of course. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
In conclusion, we find that men, women, and children are being trafficked right here in the United States. It can happen in any community, and victims can be any age, race, gender, or nationality. Traffickers use violence, manipulation, or false promises of well-paying jobs or a romantic relationship to lure victims into trafficking situations. Come back and join us as we start the discussion around language barriers, or a victim's fear of their traffickers and/or fear of law enforcement, which frequently keeps victims from seeking help, making human trafficking a hidden crime.